Okay, it's been a minute. I feel like we can go ahead and get started. People will keep trickling in. So, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. I'm Anastasia Gliadkovskaya. I'm a reporter at Fierce Healthcare covering health equity, and I'm today's moderator. We're going to be focusing on innovations like virtual reality and wearables in this discussion that have begun to transform behavioral therapy and developmental services for neurodiverse populations. Evidence demonstrates high levels of engagement among learners and the potential for improved outcomes. Our panel of thought leaders will discuss key trends, implications for therapy providers, what's needed for further adoption, and the promise of these technologies. I'm honored to serve as today's moderator, and this will last about an hour. I've come up with a list of well-rounded questions that will hopefully spur a very thought-provoking discussion with a diverse set of perspectives. So before we get to it, I'm just going to quickly introduce our panelists. We have Solomon Parker, Director of Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Program Strategy at CareSource, a nonprofit health plan that serves more than 2.3 million members. We have Katya Sverdlov, co-founder and CEO of Jellica Light, a biotech company that is developing tech designed to facilitate language learning, communication skills, and to reduce anxiety for children with autism and other developmental conditions. Amber Valentino is Chief Clinical Officer at Trumpet Behavioral Health, a provider specializing in the treatment of children and adults with autism spectrum disorder and developmental disabilities using the principles of applied behavior analysis. And last but not least, Vijay Ravindran, founder and CEO of Floreo, which is the host of today's event. Floreo is a VR platform designed to teach social, communication, emotional regulation, behavioral, and life skills. Floreo's tech helps neurodiverse learners of any age and ability. Cool, so we can get started. So I wanted to start with something broad for anyone in the group. We've seen an explosion in virtual care management and telemedicine over the past couple of years, obviously accelerated by the pandemic. And I wanted to ask what their potential, these technologies' potential is, specifically for neurodiverse populations, and maybe some powerful examples of improved outcomes that you've seen.
I'm very happy to, go ahead.
Please, Amber, go ahead.
I'm happy to kick us off. I think we're all here because there's so much potential for technology to improve the care of neurodiverse individuals. One of the things that we often think about is the experience of patients, of clients. And when I think about technology and I think about the immediate impact, I think a lot about the fact that technology often has the opportunity to have patients more engaged in the experience of learning, to make things more exciting and more fun, and to obviously also get good outcomes. And so we've had a lot of success looking at the traditional variables that would be of interest. Are kids learning new skills? Are they making progress? But also the things that are a little less spoken about, like indices of happiness. Are they happy when they're engaged with the technology? Things like social validity. Are their parents enjoying the use? Do they see it as a valid way to teach? And we're seeing very positive outcomes with things like virtual reality and other technologies that we're incorporating into our intervention. So I think those pieces are also important to talk about and show a lot of promise as well.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at those innovations, you start with the fact that we have a population that's growing rapidly. The diagnosis rate has been going up. That staffing shortages has stressed the traditional services that are there for this community, and so wait lists are growing longer. And so the promise of virtual technologies is to increase access and to create pathways where there's more affordable care because staff can be potentially remote, that larger employment pools are put into practice, and that the strain on families having to get to physical centers for treatment can be there. But I think moreover, for technologies like Katya's and ours, there's also the ability for these technologies to go into the home, to be used in ways that allow families to be able to, in their time and lifestyle of where it's appropriate, be able to incorporate additional capabilities that can help that child reach new skills faster?
So I'm speaking to the choir here because, enabling technologies has been around for years. But as we all know, the pandemic helped elevate the conversation even more. To VJ's point, if you're looking at staffing shortages, also transportation or access to transportation, I think we're looking at now across the board of how enabling technologies can address those geographic barriers, health equity as a solution for those who may or may not have access to technologies. And I think that's also something that states are looking as well, is what are the innovations that you can bring to a state to help support their Medicaid recipients or other people who are in need of services.
And if I can just add on a completely different note, when therapy or treatments are providing in person may have a certain impact, but the measurements of progress is very qualitative, and it depends on the person measuring the impact. Digital treatments, digital technologies have at least the potential of doing much more quantitative measurement of progress or lack of progress or weakness areas, and that has a potential of really enabling then the therapists, the doctors, the parents to focus on the areas that need the most help.
Such a great point. Yeah, thank you for that. And we'll definitely circle back to measuring progress. But what I'm hearing from you all is the benefits to patients, to families, how this can help with health equity and to catch patients when, they're in the home, for example, and can't travel. I want to talk about the clinical side and engaging with providers to prescribe or use these technologies, because as we know, doctors can be really resistant to change and they're very evidence-based. They want a lot of data, a lot of proof that something is going to be effective. And we know that there has been some hesitancy historically of physicians and therapists to prescribe something like a digital therapeutic. So I'm wondering how you think about this challenge. How do you think about engaging providers, getting them on board? Is it a matter of collecting more data and presenting that to them? Is it some sort of education campaign that needs to happen? What do you think?
I'm going to jump in. All of the above and more. But some doctors, no matter what you present, will not want to be first adopters. And so it's just going to be a matter of usage. The more parents or children are using a certain technology, the more it's incorporated as the standard of care, the more doctors are going to use it. But then the question is, how do you get there? A lot of clinicians want to see some form of biomarkers or physiological change, which has been a huge issue with neurodiverse population. There are no biomarkers, so definitely no specific biomarkers of improvement. There is many behavioral scales, and there are different discussions about which one is more valid and which one is more valid for a particular population. So I think it's going to be a long haul for convincing clinicians, and I believe it's going to start with parents. As desperate parents start using different technology and they see benefit, they will be the ones asking their clinicians to incorporate a certain novelty into the practice. So I think that's where it's going to have to start. And then all the other things such as biomarkers and improved behavioral skills will follow.
Yeah,
I agree.
I would add, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Solomon, you go.
It's you.
I also think there's a space to talk about efficiency. And so all of the things that Katya talked about, but also, can we do those things? Can we show those outcomes more quickly and with less resources? And I think that tells a convincing story, right? Because if you can do more with less and you can reduce the burden of staffing and resources that are so desperately needed, and the experience can be a positive one for clients, for patients, and for the provider, I think that can move mountains as well in terms of convincing stakeholders that technology is the way to go, even early on.
I think there's 5 opportunities here. Data. And did I say data? Those are the things that's going to be really key, I think, to really push forward any use of enabling technologies because without it, especially from the payer perspective, it's very hard to get that approved through any channels if you don't have those outcomes to show that it's remotely toward evidence based. And I know, there's some additional questions down the road, but I think as far as other barriers, cost. If you're looking at cost as a way to get that in the door as well to providers, from the prescribing physician down to those that will be actually using it, what are ways that you can improve those areas?
Mm-hmm. Right. So getting more data, showing it to the providers and payers for reimbursement, and also getting parents on board to put that pressure on providers. I also wanted to ask, Katya, your company just
one more thought to that.
Go ahead.
Yes, but let's not forget the end user themselves. That may not always be the kid. It may be the adult, someone who's wanting to advocate, and it could be the child. I think we always have to start with being person-centered and putting the person first, along with their supporting team, parents, caregivers involved. But we can't lose out of the fact of how those individual advocates can be a catalyst to help drive change and innovation within states, but also with physicians to say, I want this service. Sorry to cut you there.
That's right.
No, that's great.
If I may jump in also, I think one of the things that's interesting and a bit unique about serving the neurodiverse community is how while doctors are involved in providing pediatric care and often helping with the diagnosis through neurodevelopmental pediatricians, that the therapy clinic providers end up being a more central figure in the ongoing care for the child. And so while many other digital therapeutics have had to confront winning the hearts and minds of doctors to prescribe the therapeutics, I think in this area, generating the data, winning the hearts and minds of parents who are often the quarterbacks of a comprehensive portfolio of care that no one else is coordinating for them, so they have to do it themselves. And then ultimately, there's usually at least one provider that's in a lead role for that family. And that provider is then an important influencer in what makes sense for a portfolio of families. And then also, as a strategy that we've used, is that we want to work with the best providers to generate the data to then present to someone like Solomon that this is worth incentivizing through the network of that payer.
Great points. Yeah, thank you both for that. And I wanted to just talk about FDA approval really quick. I know, Katya, you just started your third clinical trial. You're looking for FDA approval for your non-invasive device to reduce autism spectrum disorder symptoms. Vijay, I know you've expressed interest in pursuing that route as well, although Floreo is already on the market. So talk about your thinking in vying for that and why pursuing such a path might be appealing for various reasons.
We decided to go the FDA route first and foremost without going in the market because we are providing non-invasive brain stimulation. I have children of my own. I would not want to do something to my children's brain without being sure that what I'm doing is, one, first and foremost, safe, and second, that it's actually going to have some effect. And how would I know this information? I can ask other people, but how do I know that they're good? And the only true arbiter of this right now in the US is the FDA. It may not be 100% right 100% of the time, but this is as good as it gets. So we wanted to provide this peace of mind to parents who will be using this technology, that it has been tested for safety as well as for efficacy through independent trials, and it's effective. Second, we wanted to provide this peace of mind to clinicians who will be prescribing it, because we just talked about how hard it is to convince clinicians to prescribe something new. How hard is it to convince them to prescribe something new that has not been tested by the FDA? One, they potentially have liability from their own, if God forbid something goes wrong. And also just why would they, there are many wellness treatments out there with dubious safety and efficacy issues. So for that third of, is not least, is of course eventually insurance reimbursement. Again, having FDA approval is not a guarantee that it will be reimbursed, but at least it gets you on the way. There was something else, but that's good enough. So we, yes, we started the pivotal clinical trial right now with SUNY Upstate Medical. And so these results, once completed, will be submitted to the FDA. Oh, right, safety of usage, of course. So again, something is out there in the market without clear instructions, it can potentially be misused. And then again, this is for our own liability protection, not just peace of mind. If something has been FDA approved, has been tested in the rigorous trials, that if used as directed, it is safe. Therefore, if somebody is misusing it, there is that higher burden of proof for them to show that it's not. We want this to be prescribed for and monitored by the clinicians. We want parents to be very clear about the instructions, and the FDA process and later approval gives us all of it. It's not 100% proof, but this is, again, this is as good as it gets in the US for both peace of mind for the parent and the clinician, for eventual insurance reimbursement, and for the protection of the company that the device is used as intended.
Really great overview. Thank you.
Yeah, so for us, we have started as a tool for providers to use. Virtual reality is obviously available to consumers through products that are generally available through retail channels. So we saw research as a key stepping stone to getting providers to start using the product in fashions that allowed them to develop comfort, and then do research together to build that base. The reason we're pursuing FDA approval is because it does create an elevated proof of efficacy and safety in the context of the standards of care that exist. And so we're about to start a pivotal trial to that end. The other piece is that it opens up reimbursement pathways that we think are particularly important to our community of customers, namely, built around the CPT codes. And so that's an area that we're closely looking at. Separately, FDA approval is a hurdle and step towards prescription digital therapeutics legislation that's on the Hill right now, and will likely open up new benefit category reimbursement. And so I think for companies like ours and Katya's, it's a vital step toward being able to create a scalable business.
Fascinating. Well, that's a great segue for us to talk about the reimbursement landscape. Anybody can jump in, but help us understand what the reimbursement pathways are out there for VR-mediated therapy or other behavioral health tech for neurodiverse populations.
Yeah, this is an area that Floreo has been doing a lot of experimentation over the last several years. It started with Medicaid waiver programs in states. State Medicaid programs are often more on the cutting edge of experimenting on new solutions because they're trying to reach communities that often have challenge receiving the appropriate amounts of care that they need. And waiver programs within these Medicaid programs in states are often opportunities. And so, we were fortunate enough to get approval in several states, including Wisconsin, that have helped spearhead some early work around treating Floreo as a prescription and creating 3, 6, and 12-month style prescriptions of the technology that families working with their Medicaid service coordinators can access. As we work with providers, we've looked at the fact that providers already use treatment codes as part of their lifeblood of their business. And so we targeted CPT codes as the pathway for our technology to blend into that workflow, which led us to proposing a CPT-3 code for virtual reality to be used as a practice expense on existing therapy codes across behavioral therapy. And so The AMA approved the proposed code that we put in front of them last year. The code is 0770T for those who are geeky enough to go look it up. But the practice code creates the plumbing for how VR can be incorporated into augmenting treatment. It's up to the qualified healthcare provider's professional judgment to choose to use VR as something to augment that treatment. But we've created the structure for it to then go alongside the treatment code they're already using in a manner that's complementary. And so those are the two areas we've been looking at. We obviously pay attention to the other digital therapeutic companies, many of whom have been focused on HCPCS codes at the CMS level, and most notably Applied VR's classification as durable medical equipment.
Great, thank you so much. That's helpful.
Yeah, and I'll chime in on there. I think that's the $1 million question. How do you get it paid? Because you can go, the national trend, as VJ mentioned, are a lot of state entities, especially if they're renewing their Medicaid waivers, are looking to incorporate enabling technologies within it. So a lot of that does start with that advocacy level, policy level at that state part. But as that's happening, I think if you're looking at providers, for nonprofits, there may be grant opportunities for them to adopt or to look at ways to utilize the software or the equipment within their practices. I think that from a health plan perspective, partnering with health plans, you got to really look at this is the evil side of it, so bear with me, but how are you helping to reduce costs by also improving quality outcomes? Could that lend itself to future conversations around VBR discussions or alternative payment models? So there's a lot of different ways to look at it. I think that's the good thing and the bad thing about it, because there's not just a straight road to get product from development to here's the product to now let's get it paid for.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that it's actually helpful to start with a government payer like a Medicaid plan, and then try to get movement there before maybe turning to the commercial side. I wanted to ask about remote therapeutic monitoring or remote patient monitoring codes. Do those apply here at all? Can they be leveraged in some way?
I've seen some instances, especially with Medicare, because Medicare generally covers the RTM codes. At least I know for the couple of states that we're in that it does. And so that is an add-on code that can be used that I've heard to help incentivize providers to adopt those technologies. Have you heard the same, VJ?
Yes, and I think to go back to one of Katya's earlier points, I think it plays in here, which is that as these digital treatments also provide assessment and scoring abilities on progress, then they have the opportunity to tap into being used in that monitoring capacity in a way that provides feedback back to either the provider or payer on what's happening in progress. And so I think there's opportunities. Our research has shown that most of this is gated on FDA approval. So I think we need to get there first before we're figuring out exactly what we can deploy. And then furthermore, if you're providing an assessment or diagnostic, you likely need additional FDA approval, because there's been recent guidance for digital therapeutics that if you're in a clinical decision support capacity as a digital tool, then you also need additional FDA approval for that. So there's likely regulatory hurdles, but potentially valuable new applications of the technology if you can get there.
Well, and with that, let me chime in with the diagnostic part. So if you're looking at what you're trying to solve for example, a lot of states, I think this is a national trend, are faced with long waiting lists for diagnosing of autism. And how can a solution be used to minimize that wait list time so that kids are getting diagnosed or assessed and diagnosed early on and not having to wait to 4 or 5, as studies have shown? Early diagnosing is important because that leads to then potential early treatment. So if we're looking at solving for that problem, then that is a way to get a lot of different entities on board to say, how can we have fun this work? Because everyone is trying to solve for one of those solutions.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I think this is where there's been a really important breakthrough in the market with early tech's FDA approval in the last 3 months, where they have a FDA approved now diagnostic for autism that's based on eye gaze tracking, and they've released some really impressive research and have labeling between 18 months and 36 months, which does address a valuable age cohort where early diagnosis could be really beneficial.
Mm. Yeah, I appreciate that point, because I think it's we might like to talk about treatment a lot, but we might often forget that diagnosis is the first step to treatment. And there is another company that I've covered before, Cognoa, that has developed Canvas DX, which is a similar diagnostic tool for providers to help speed up that process. I believe they've received FDA approval at this point, but they were certainly seeking it.
Yeah,
Okay, great. Yeah. So exciting. So I wanted to turn back to something Katya was talking about earlier, which is tracking progress and outcomes. How do we measure that? There's an ongoing debate in the behavioral health space about this. Is it clinical or patient-reported outcomes? Is it government measures? And this is something that is especially challenging in the neurodiverse space, as Katya was saying. And we know that collecting this data is really critical, not only to improving care, but also to seeking those regulatory approvals or reimbursement we were talking about. So I wanted to ask how you all think about tracking outcomes and measuring progress in this space.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. This is a topic that I think everybody is talking about. I was sharing the other day that not a week goes by where I'm not asked to sit on a committee or provide some sort of thought leadership on outcomes. And there is some good work being done here. There are intelligent people thinking about measures, recommending them. I think what we're struggling with is sort of theory to practice divide, and that it's not that there aren't good measures out there. It's not that there aren't good ideas. It's not that there aren't good packages. But when you take those recommendations and you try to fit them into the existing infrastructure of service delivery, it's structurally and logistically a huge challenge. And so I think we will need to make movement on the structural piece of service delivery to accommodate the good outcome measures that are out there. I think it's doable, but I think this is a place where technology has a huge opportunity to improve the efficiency with which we work, and to take some of those great ideas and get them into practice in a way that isn't overly taxing on the providers. Because I think that's really the discussion now is, yes, we want to do this, but as everybody has mentioned, we're in a staffing shortage. We have too many kids. We have people we are trying to help in the day-to-day life of a practitioner, as well as the general provider workforce is pretty taxed right now. And so fitting all of that into the existing infrastructure is really a challenge. But I think that's where technology is going to really come to play in terms of streamlining those processes and making it more efficient.
I think I want to go back to also what Amber said earlier about efficiency. Can you get to some outcome? We have to step back, like, what is the outcome? And who is being asked about the outcome? The parent wants some level the child to be completely independent. Are we ever going to get to that? If not, the state, one of the biggest costs for autism treatment is adult residential care, when someone cannot live independently and they have to be institutionalized. Are we getting to the, I mean, it's a very long-term outcome, but are we getting to the place where Medicaid does not have to pay for residential care? If we're not going that far and we're looking at the school and it's each particular state, are we enabling the child to leave special needs education and go mainstream, and saving the state a huge lot of money in that? Or if they're staying in the special needs class, are they able to move up a level to have less than one-on-one instruction? So these are very long-term outcomes measures that again, they're being looked at, but really the focus from FDA, the focus from therapists is much more short-term measures. What is the functional? And again, for parents and for clinicians and for therapists, they're all different, right? Is the child able to use the bathroom independently? It's a huge outcome measurement, but it's not usually being captured on many different tests. Is the child able to communicate his needs, either verbally or by using an assistive device? It's a huge outcome measure. So it is complicated. It is a complicated measurement, and the time frame of that measurement is a huge issue as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that I think the ideal world is one where the parents are not asked to fill out, 100+ questionnaires to provide assessment on a annual or semi-annual basis. It's a burden. The child is not spending valuable treatment hours, instead doing scoring for any reason. And so I think the promise of digital, treatments is that they have the potential to also provide assessment as a natural course of delivery in a way that doesn't tax the provider, doesn't tax the kid or the families, and provides ideally something. And this is one of the reasons I mentioned early tech specifically, is that what's elegant about early tech, unlike Canvas DX and some of the others, is that it's completely quantitative in how it reaches its conclusion. There's no parent survey. There's no cultural challenges around different socio-demographic families answering questions differently. You have a big challenge in the way assessments are done right now, where if I ask a set of parents and one of those parents is autistic, their answers on the behaviors of their child are going to be naturally different than if the parent is coming from a different background. And I think those factors, I think, create a lot of ambiguity in the quality of care that we're able to deliver. And I think the opportunities with digital treatments to create more standardized and versions that are not taxing on everyone involved is really powerful.
So I'm hearing you say, it sounds like the key to reducing human bias and error is leveraging technology to help with tracking some of these things. Because like you said, it's a huge administrative burden. Even if it can automate some of those metrics or those notes, then that would help with accuracy for providers. I wanted to ask, Vijay, you've talked about other use cases for VR beyond healthcare, and that could be for content related to developing job skills or for individualized education plans. And I feel like they're related, right? Like those are critical skills in order to have health and well-being. So how do you think about that side of the business, and where's the overlap?
Yeah, I mean, I think to pick up on what Katya said earlier, right, that what does the family want? The family wants the child to be able to be gainfully employed when they become an adult, to be able to live independently if that's possible, to have meaningful relationships, right? So those don't all nicely fit into a healthcare box in the ways that we as a society try to help neurodiverse children as they grow up. We see the educational system as being partly responsible for providing services to that child so that they're able to succeed in the school. And that's expressed through the individualized education plan in our public school systems. We see it come out in vocational agency programs and what is often referred to as vocational rehabilitation. But essentially, that these programs are meant to provide skills so that individuals, as they become adults, can be gainfully employed. And so, for Floreo, we start with the needs of the neurodiverse individual and their families and work backwards from there. And so we see VR as a powerful capability, and we haven't seen it strictly boundaried by what fits into a pure healthcare context, because we think of it as all healthcare. The fact of the matter is your school district is a healthcare provider. The job agencies that service individuals over 18 to find job skills in the IDD and neurodiverse communities, they are a healthcare provider too, because ultimately what is healthy is to achieve these different life goals.
So I may be giving away the goods here. So VJ, if you get anything out of this, come back, talk to me. Social determinants of health. That is an area of opportunity where VR can really help elevate and solve for solutions. So VJ just mentioned around employment. Let's take that a step further. Career exploration, career discovery. What are opportunities within nursing? What are opportunities within working at Amazon packaging? What are opportunities working at a grocery store? What are opportunities working at these different places that you can now introduce to people so that they can see, is this something I'm interested in doing before taking the next step of going to the actual place to see it? So that's one idea. Another use case, and again, when I'm my background, individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and let me preface, that tends to be the last group of people introduced to any type of technologies. So when we talk about use cases, it does have to be an entire team supporting and saying, here's some ideas of where we can work with providers, parents, caregivers, and again, the individual themselves. But employment, housing supports. A lot of times we hear as a barrier for someone transitioning from an intermediate care facility or a nursing facility is that this person cannot live independently or they cannot maintain ADLs. They don't know what to do in an emergency. They can't shop for themselves. Well, here's the way now that you can use VR to test those skills and now you have an unbiased metric that says this person accomplished this, they passed this. Now there's nothing to tell those teams in those institutional or nursing facility settings that no, this person cannot access that care. So again, housing, employment, you can look at this as far as introducing education, relationships, relational health. VJ, I remember you telling me there was last year there was a VR solution around dating. And what does that look like for someone wanting to experience and learn what it is for dating? So that to me is the next level that's different than just the traditional healthcare model, social determinants of health.
And I think as an extension to that, thinking through all of the support types of services that go into serving people. And so Vijay and I have spoken often about training and how oftentimes people come into working with this population having not had any experiences doing so, and how technology could really be leveraged to give them meaningful insight into what it's like to work with this population to figure out, is this a good match for me? Is this what I want to dedicate my life to? Because for some people, the answer is no. And we'd rather get that experience to them early rather than out there and experience later. And so I think about that. And then also just about some of the heightened experiences that teams can have, for example, around crises, right? You can more adequately support people in responding to crises in a virtual world. You can more safely do that. You can help them experience it so when it comes time, they're adequately prepared. And I think all of those support services all go into the mission of the most provider organizations, which is to support the neurodiverse individually as fully as possible.
And with that point, a plug for Floreo, one of the scenarios you have is police interaction. And so what does that now offer for that user, the learner, the person that's using the system? But also now, what about those first responders who are in those situations and seeing from a user perspective, this is what I feel or I'm encountering when I'm encountering an officer. So to Amber's point, it could be a great tool to help train those first responders or crisis responders as well.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. And I wanted to ask, since you're talking about, Solomon, you brought up people with intellectual and developmental disabilities being among the last of the populations that get introduced to this technology. Are there certain, this is a question for any of you, maybe there are certain segments of the population that this might not necessarily be right for? I don't know if it's like really young children or children in unique environments or settings. I'm just thinking about, where is this technology maybe not quite right or not quite there yet to serve some of these people?
Yeah, I mean, Katya and I have different products, so I'll let her speak to hers. In the case of virtual reality, the weight of the headset ends up being a gating factor. So if a child is young or if the child or adult has muscle and strength challenges in their neck and their ability to hold their head up with an additional 1 to 2 pounds on top, then that can be a barrier to entry. Obviously, vision can greatly impact the ability to get value out of virtual reality. So I think there are definitely things that need to be ideal for using it, but the vast majority are able to get benefit once they reach the age of 4 or 5 years old, enough that they can support the weight of the headset and are able to perceive the imagery. But beyond that, I think we've seen special attention to the needs for what's now described as profound autism. These are often individuals that might have self-injurious behaviors and that the headset itself might be an obstacle. But we've been working with a great provider in the Mid-Atlantic, Bancroft, where they presented research at ABAI in May about the acceptance of VR once aware of what was happening inside of the headset and able to get comfortable. It was really heartening. But I think there's often, different children can often be very sensory sensitive, and trying to come up with the right techniques to warm them up is a key.
I think, well, our technology is just not ready until it goes through FDA approval. So we are not selling, we are not treating only through clinical trials. But in general, I think as applies for ours, as applies to most, the goal is personalization. And it's a huge mountain to climb. And I think the more data people get, the better it's going to be, whether it's level of autism, whether it's genetics, whether it's symptoms, and even for the higher functioning individuals, some are withdrawn, some are not, have different challenges. So I think constant enhancement through data collection and personalization is what makes it so exciting, because the possibilities are really endless.
Yeah, that's great. Salman, go ahead.
A couple of things. One, I think right now within the distance of my reach out, there's 3 things that I have right now. There's a digital therapeutic or enabling technology. I got to incorporate digital therapeutics more in my language. I'm wearing a watch, I have a phone, and there's an Alexa nearby. So for anybody who's on this call, I hope your Alexa went off too. But those are things that are right now impacting us. So yes, for individual solutions, there may be limitations, but as a broader whole, when we talk about the entire population, let's not limit someone's abilities to say that they can't have access to or be introduced to solutions. Secondly, we got to involve the person. Who's the person utilizing this service, and have them at the forefront with innovating, talking about, discussing. And lastly, something that personally is a mission for me is how to help support more entrepreneurs with disabilities with growing and innovating within their own software solutions and platforms. Because I think those are all tied together of how we can help with continuing innovating, and so that all people can have access to technologies.
Yeah, and I will say, one of the things we've tried to work on is challenging any assumptions that might come with rolling out these new technologies. And so just to give you an example, with virtual reality, we were prepared for the kids in our trial to resist, to say, I don't want to do that. And we had protocols, we were ready, we were decision-making models on how to navigate those complexities. And our sample size is not huge, but it is something. We have not yet had to use those because the technology was so readily accepted. And so I think as providers, we can often go in thinking this is going to be a struggle, or this is not going to be accepted, and can be pleasantly surprised when kids, especially the younger generations, say, no, we like this. And technology is a normal part of everybody's life, and it's a part of my life too. And so that has been a blessing in disguise, that the acceptance and the usability of technologies, even ones that seem like, gosh, I'm going to put that headset on. Is that going to go all right? Are being welcomed. And so really thinking outside the box and being open to the fact that it may not be what you expect going in, and it may be more positive is an exciting place to be as well.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And I wanted to talk about Pear Therapeutics bankruptcy earlier this year. For those who need a reminder, Pear was the maker of several digital therapeutics that were approved by the FDA, but according to the founder and CEO's own words, the company had struggled to secure reimbursement and thus revenue. And so I wanted to ask like what you see as the implications of that bankruptcy on your space, if any, and how are you thinking about this challenge considering we are still in the very, very early stages of reimbursement?
I think investors learned a harsh lesson that FDA approval does not equal a successful business by itself. That there are many other factors that go in beyond the approval. That the product has to fit the workflow and expectations of the patient and end user, the providers if they're distributing it, the providers if they're prescribing it. It has to meet their own standards of whether they want to do that, and it has to create the data and value in the eyes of the payer to incentivize and create the ecosystem for that adoption. And so there's several moving parts that have to be simultaneously worked on while also working on the regulatory approvals that your business might need. And so I think how is it affected? I think investors are having much savvier conversations about codes and reimbursement and commercialization go-to-market strategies than they probably did before they saw this happen.
It hasn't made life easy. So just being honest. I mean, I 100% agree with Vijay. Yes. And one of another reasons why people were bringing up for their collapse is also they were doing a lot of things simultaneously. And so lack of focus is a big issue. One, it costs money to pursue many different areas simultaneously, and two, management is just not able to focus on everything simultaneously. So whereas I think in the past, one of the constant questions was, autism or neurodivergence is great, and how else is it going to be used for? What else are we going to use this technology for? Now I think one of the directions of the conversations is, what's your focus? What's your beachhead? Let's get through this, and then potentially go into 20 different other areas, but let's see you being successful here. So I think it's a very helpful lesson for companies and for investors, not to push founders into 20 different directions simultaneously, because that's almost a guarantee of the collapse going forward. And yes, no, let me just reiterate, it has not made life easy for any founders.
It's lunchtime here, so my thoughts immediately go to food. So it's restaurants open, close every single day, but a good restaurant has more than just the hype. It has good quality under it. So to that question of what you just asked, for us, it made us skittish as well, because we don't want to introduce a solution that we think could be beneficial to members, CareSource members in this case, that then doesn't have any bones behind it and it collapses. Because that means that we are investing in you, organization, hoping that you have the sustainable model that can continue to evolve with us and innovate. But if there's nothing there, then that makes us look not great for the state that we're pitching these ideas and innovations to.
That's a really great point. And I think the Pear story, what is not talked about enough is, what did that mean for Oklahoma Medicaid or some of these other payers that had started prescribing, and people have started using the product given everything that happened. And I think similarly in the ABA industry, we've seen some providers close states down, and there's a way to do it that's caring for families and individuals, and a way not to do it, and not everyone has done it in a way that's been caring for families.
Thank you for those insights. That's really great. And I wanted to ask about Akili. They made their digital therapeutic for ADHD available direct to consumer. Is that a viable option? I mean, when thinking about specifically your technologies and the potential cost for people out of pocket, is direct to consumer something that you're considering in the face of lagging reimbursement?
I'll jump. We have no plans of doing that. Just again, different technologies with different potential for misuse, different potential. We are doing brain stimulation, which if done too much, there can be side effects. On the low side of side effects, there can be overexcitement, there can be headaches. No one knows the longer term potential side effects. You could potentially, with using too much, too high, even trigger seizures. So like that's one of the risks that FDA is always looking at. We haven't seen it, thankfully, and I don't want to see so ever. So we want to make sure that it is used properly under clinician supervision with no potential of misuse, and therefore we always intend to have this technology as a medical device with clinicians' prescription and supervision. That being said, I fully understand EndeavorX's problems, Akili's problems. It is hard to convince clinicians to use something new. And if we knew that it's going to be easy, we would not have gotten to it. So yes, it's a challenge, and we can different technology, different risk potentials, not for us.
Yeah, I tend to think about the challenge for all digital therapeutic companies, and how do you show that you have product market fit? How do you build a case so that payers feel like there's value in their ecosystem for you to be part of their solution portfolio to families? And I think one way to do that is the Floreo approach of working with great providers like Amber and Trumpet, and being able to go arm in arm with them to people like Solomon to say, this is a quality solution, here's the research, here's how it's being used in practice. I think another approach, which you've seen Mightier do, and to some extent now Akili is like Mightier. Mightier is a anxiety video game with a wearable component, and basically you can if you market directly to families or adults, in the case of the Akili over-the-counter offering for EndeavorRx or Endeavor OTC, you can show product market fit, because if people are buying it and enjoying it, and it's building up a base of recurring users that are renewing those subscriptions, that is evidence of adherence and usage that can be valuable to then make a better case to payers or employers, if you're going down the employer insurance route, to do. So I think it is a strategy. I think what our learnings have been is that we want to work with great providers that integrate us into the workflow of care. And to the extent that families are using Floreo in the home, that we want to go through programs like Medicaid, where the costs are covered and they have access to the appropriate trainings to use the product, and the appropriate treatment plan management or lesson curriculum management that they're able to get from a qualified healthcare provider. That it's, for our product, it's a too big of a burden to put on the parents by themselves without anything else. And so it hasn't fit our focus of strategy, because of where we see the best use of our system. Ultimately, our goal also is to reach millions of kids, and we have to fit into the current ecosystem to do that. If it's an out-of-pocket offering that only certain people have the funds to be able to afford, then it immediately hits a much more smaller set. But in the Achilles case, if it's a means to an end, then it might still achieve that. If they're able to show that their product has, because I think a challenge with a lot of these digital therapeutics end up being the refill rates are very low. So you go through all this effort, you get FDA approved, you get a HCPCS code, you're out there. But then if you have like a 10 or 15% refill rate on a 3-month prescription, then as a digital product, then where are you?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. It's such a complex issue. Like on the one hand, you don't want to, undercut some of the work that you're doing, but on the other hand, it might be the only path forward, like you said, to create that popularity among the public and put that pressure on payers and providers. Just before we get to our last question, before we wrap up, I wanted to mention to the audience, we will not be taking questions. So yeah, just stick around, and we're almost through. So the last question I wanted to ask is related to what we've been talking about, which is, reimbursement is such a big question. The future is a little bit uncertain, and without this reimbursement, it's not clear whether these technologies really have a sustainable future. So I'm wondering what you're hopeful about, what you expect to happen or hope will happen in the next couple of years that keeps you going.
I think this is the future. There's no choice. The world is moving into digital therapeutics for many different reasons, such as we talked about. And one way or the other, BJ's company, our company, other companies, a combination of, it's going to work. It's going to work in the sense that it's going to make people's lives better. Which makes me quite excited that I'm at the forefront of the future in this one small way. So regardless how reimbursement, I mean, it would be much better if it worked faster. And this is where we're going, and it doesn't mean that the in-person therapies or anything is going to be replaced. It's going to enhance. It's going to enhance, and it's going to make it better. And so it makes me excited that people's life will improve.
Yeah,
Go ahead, please, Amber.
Yeah, I would just add to that. The first thing that came to mind when you asked that question was the opportunity for collaboration and for networking and supporting across a wide range of skill sets. And so when I think about the future of autism care, I hope there are people that have varied expertise. I hope there are engineers. I hope there are specialists in technology. I hope there are behavior analysts. I hope there are psychologists. I hope there's a team of people thinking about that person and their family and the unit and all of the possibilities that go into caring for them. And I think technologies like these are moving us toward that, right? Because you have to have that collaboration, and you have to have that unity in order to provide the service and to provide the technology appropriately. So that's the thing I'm most excited about. And even just this roundtable is an example of that type of collaboration that's exciting.
I would say that we as payers, collective, that we are able to keep speed. To Katya's point, the future is now. So we can't wait to get evidence and data and test and pilot, because 2 years from now, there may be something else that comes up within that time that's already happening now. So we've got to figure out collectively how to stay cutting edge, how to continue to innovate, but also get the information we need to make an informed decision.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to put my parent hat on for a second as the parent of a neurodiverse child, and that's that, as for families, you feel the clock ticking towards adulthood. You want desperately for the ceiling to be raised up as high as possible for what your child is going to be able to achieve in adulthood. And I think for us, for Delica Light, for other novel treatment solutions that are being developed right now, we're trying to move as fast as possible to create the data and collaborative relationships that lead to this technology reaching the millions of families that are waiting for solutions and are desperate to see those same goals that I have.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone who joined, and thank you so much to our wonderful panelists. Thanks Floreo for organizing this roundtable. I learned so much from you guys, and I'm so excited to keep covering this space because I agree with you. I think it is the future. So thank you so much. Stay tuned for the recording.
Thank you.